For 10 long years, Emily Carson rarely slept through the night. Ever since her mother-in-law Margaret had a massive stroke that left her paralyzed from the neck down, Emily had been her primary caregiver. What began as a temporary commitment after Margaret was released from the hospital quickly became a decade-long act of devotion. She bathed her, fed her, turned her body every few hours to prevent bed sores, and learned how to administer medication, clear airways, and even manage emergency episodes. At just 26 years old, Emily had become a full-time nurse, cook, cleaner, and emotional anchor, all without ever being officially asked. Her husband, Mark, had walked out the same year Margaret fell ill. One night, he'd gone to pick up dinner and simply never came back. No call, no explanation. He vanished like smoke. Emily was left with a toddler on one hip and a woman in a wheelchair on the other. She could have left too. Most people told her she should. Friends faded. Life moved on for others. But Emily stayed. Not because she owed anyone anything, but because deep down, she knew Margaret deserved more than to be discarded in a care facility, alone and forgotten. Margaret wasn't an easy patient. In the early days, she would cry uncontrollably or lash out in frustration. But over time, something changed. A quiet understanding began to form between them, a kind of unspoken truce that grew into something gentler, something almost sacred. Emily started calling her Mom, and Margaret responded with a look in her eyes that said more than words ever could. But not everyone saw Emily the way Margaret did. To Margaret's daughter Ashley, Emily was just the help, a glorified housekeeper with no real place in the family. Ashley never missed an opportunity to toss a subtle jab at Emily, always under the guise of polite conversation. "Must be nice not having to work a real job," she'd say, her voice soaked in sugar and vinegar. "You've really settled into this role, haven't you?" And Emily's personal favorite, "You know, not everyone is cut out for a career. Some people are just better at caring." Jason, Margaret's youngest, was worse. He hardly ever showed up, and when he did, it was only to complain. "This house is falling apart," he'd say. "You should at least fix the gutters, Emily. You do live here, right?" No one asked how Emily was holding up. No one offered help. They just assumed she'd always be there, like furniture, invisible until needed. The house on Maple Street, once lively and warm, had grown quiet over the years. Margaret's laughter, though faint and rare, was the only thing that kept it from becoming a mausoleum of what once was. Emily often found herself watching the dust swirl in the sunlight and wondering where her own life had gone. She missed milestones, her son Lucas's school performances, birthday parties, even first days of school. Her parents helped as much as they could, picking him up and dropping him off, but they were aging too. Guilt gnawed at her, and she sometimes resented the heavy routine. But then she'd look at Margaret, her frail frame resting beneath soft blankets, and the resentment would dissolve into something gentler. Resolve. Margaret would sometimes try to apologize. Her voice barely a whisper, she'd say, "You shouldn't have to do this," or "You deserve more than this life." Emily would always shake her head and smile. "We're family, Mom. This is what family does." But Emily knew not everyone believed that. Margaret's other children certainly didn't. They traveled, went on cruises, bought new homes, shared selfies from weddings and wineries, while Emily scrubbed floors and made chicken pot pie from scratch, the only thing Margaret ever asked for with genuine excitement. It was a lonely existence, one where Emily's needs were always second. Her name never made it into the family group chat, the Christmas card, or the stories told at dinner tables. For all her sacrifice, she remained an outsider. And yet, she stayed. Not for praise, not for recognition, but because Emily Carson was the kind of woman who kept her promises, even when no one was watching. Even when the people who should have appreciated her the most didn't even see her. And that, though quiet, unseen, and uncelebrated, was its own kind of strength. Margaret Carson passed away at 1:52 in the morning. Emily had fed her a homemade chicken pot pie just hours earlier, the only thing Margaret ever truly looked forward to. She'd eaten more than usual that night, even asked for warm broth afterward. Her eyes had stayed on Emily the whole time, as if trying to say something she didn't have the strength to voice. And then, in the quiet early hours, she was simply gone. Emily had been through so much in that house, sleepless nights, hospital visits, whispered apologies, but nothing prepared her for the stillness of that moment, the absence, the coldness of Margaret's hand, the overwhelming silence. She sat by the bed for a long time, holding on to Margaret's fingers like they could somehow keep the woman tethered to this world, but eventually she had to let go. She kissed Margaret's forehead and whispered, "Rest now, Mom. You earned it." By 9 o'clock the next morning, Ashley stormed into the house without knocking. Her eyes scanned the room like she was checking for damage, then locked onto Emily. "What did you do?" she snapped. "What did you feed her?" Emily blinked, stunned. "Are you serious right now?" Ashley's tone sharpened. "You were the last one with her. You cooked for her. She was fine yesterday." Emily's voice trembled, not from fear, but fury. "She was dying, Ashley. She'd been dying for years. Where were you while I was cleaning her, feeding her, changing her bedding? You think I'd hurt her?" Jason arrived minutes later with his wife Courtney in tow, both wearing expressions far too composed for a family in mourning. While Ashley raged and accused, Jason stayed eerily quiet until finally stepping forward. "If you had no hidden motive," he said calmly, "why did you stay all these years?" The question hit Emily like a slap. She stared at him, speechless. That one sentence undid a decade of service in their eyes. Courtney crossed her arms. "Look, no one's trying to start a fight, but if you cared, you'll make sure Margaret gets a proper funeral. That's all we're asking." Emily wanted to scream, but she didn't. She simply nodded. Of course. The funeral was small, quiet, and, ironically, peaceful. But the moment it ended, peace left with it. In the reception hall, the three siblings huddled in a corner with a notary and a lawyer. They whispered and flipped through folders like vultures dividing a carcass. Within an hour, the family homes Margaret had spent her life building were split between them. Jason took the white bungalow on Chestnut Lane. Ashley claimed the brick colonial near the river. Courtney, though not a blood relative, insisted on managing what little was left in the joint savings account, $50,000. Emily? She was given the old Victorian house on Maple Street, the one no one wanted, the one full of creaky stairs, leaky pipes, and fading wallpaper, the one she had spent the last 10 years keeping intact with her bare hands and borrowed tools. They handed her the key like it was a consolation prize. That night, as she lay in the worn-down bedroom that still smelled faintly of lavender and medicine, Emily stared at the ceiling. There was no comfort in the silence anymore, only questions. Had she wasted a decade? Had her love, her labor, really meant nothing? The grief was raw, but what cut deeper was the ingratitude. Not once had Ashley or Jason said thank you. Not one of them acknowledged what Emily had done to keep their mother alive with dignity. She thought about selling the house, just walking away, but something inside her couldn't do it, at least not yet. She wanted to clean it properly first. Say goodbye to it on her own terms. If nothing else, she had earned that. The next morning, Emily began dusting and scrubbing room by room. When she reached the hallway, she noticed something odd, a series of muddy footprints on the freshly cleaned floor. Her brow furrowed. She knelt to check the floorboards and realized one was loose, warped slightly from age and moisture. Curious, she pried it up. Beneath the board, in a hollowed-out space, lay a tightly wrapped bundle. Her heart pounded as she reached in. Bills, dozens, then hundreds of $100 bills, wrapped in elastic, stacked with care. Her breath caught. She rushed to lock the front door, then returned with trembling hands to the hidden compartment. 2 hours later, she had counted every single bill, $300,000, and tucked beneath the last stack was a yellowed envelope with her name on it. Inside was a short note, written in shaky handwriting. "Dear Emily, this is for you. Stop waiting for Mark. He's not coming back. You gave me the last good years of my life. I saw you. I cherished you. Now go live your life. Love always, Mom." The tears came hard. 10 years of loneliness, 10 years of silence, 10 years of feeling invisible, broken in one stroke of ink and a handful of bills. Emily clutched the letter to her chest, the money forgotten for the moment. Margaret had seen her, truly seen her. And that changed everything. Emily didn't tell a soul about the money. Not Ashley, not Jason, not even her own parents. The $300,000 Margaret had hidden wasn't just an inheritance, it was a lifeline. It was the first time in 10 years Emily had something to call her own, something not tied to obligation or sacrifice. She deposited the money in 2 separate banks, under accounts she opened solely in her name. She consulted a financial advisor and had them set up a trust fund for her son, Lucas, making herself the sole trustee and legally excluding his father, Mark, from any access. She didn't know if Mark would ever come back, but if he did, he wouldn't be able to touch a cent. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. "Emily's acting different lately," she overheard at the grocery store. "She must have gotten something in the will." "She's lucky, honestly. Did you see the way Jason and Ashley fought over everything?" Emily kept her head down, as always. But in the back of her mind, unease started to settle. Margaret's death had stirred something in that family, something greedy, calculating, and cold. And if Courtney or Jason ever got wind of the money, she didn't even want to finish the thought. A week later, she was eating dinner with her parents and Lucas at a small family restaurant near the edge of town. For the first time in years, she felt the warmth of a normal evening, a hot plate of roast chicken, laughter from her son, her father's usual jokes. It felt like healing, until she stepped into the hallway to head to the restroom and heard her name. "They're sitting there laughing like they own the world," hissed a familiar voice. Emily froze. It was Courtney. "I'm telling you," Courtney continued, "that woman found something in the house. Mark thinks so too. If she really has it and she marries someone else, that money's gone for good. You need to do something." "Court," Jason muttered nervously. "She's got a kid. We can't—" "Don't be an idiot," Courtney snapped. "If she has the money, it should be yours. Your mom didn't raise us for nothing. You really gonna let some ex-daughter-in-law walk off with everything?" Emily's heart pounded so hard it echoed in her ears. She slowly backed away and slipped into a side hallway, pulling out her phone. Her hands trembled as she pressed record, catching every word. Later that night, Emily played the recording over and over. Jason, Courtney, plotting, pressuring, talking about her like she was a thief, like she didn't spend 10 years cleaning their mother's wounds and holding her hand at night. And then there was Mark. The mention of his name hit her like a brick. Mark, who had vanished a decade ago, now suddenly thinks she found something? Of course he did. He always had a radar for easy money. Emily knew it was only a matter of time before he showed up. She didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, she stepped out of the grocery store, a bag of milk and eggs swinging at her side, and nearly dropped everything when she saw him. Mark Carson, standing on the corner in a wrinkled coat, suitcase at his feet, fake smile plastered across his face. "Emily," he said, like nothing had ever happened. "It's been a long time." She didn't answer, just stared. For a moment her mind went blank. Then she walked right past him. Didn't say a word, didn't look back, but her fingers curled tight around the grocery bag until the plastic strained, and her heart thudded against her ribs like a war drum. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She watched from the living room window, every creak of the house making her nerves twitch. She checked the locks twice, pulled Lucas's mattress closer to her room. Something was coming. She could feel it. The next afternoon, Lucas came home with his backpack slung over one shoulder and an innocent smile. "Mom, a man talked to me outside school today. He said he was my dad." Emily's blood turned to ice. "What did you say to him?" "I told him I didn't remember him," Lucas said. "He said I looked just like him, but I don't think I do. He was weird." Emily knelt down and held his small hand tightly. "If you ever see him again, sweetheart, don't talk. Just come find me or a teacher, okay?" Lucas nodded slowly. "Is he dangerous?" She hesitated. He doesn't love the way a real dad should. That evening, Emily called her lawyer and requested updated copies of the trust paperwork. The next morning, she went to the courthouse and filed a temporary restraining order against Jason, Courtney, and Mark. They were circling like vultures, but she wasn't their prey. She was a mother now, a protector, and she had everything to lose. The knock on the door came at 9:17 p.m. Emily was in the middle of folding laundry when it startled her. She peeked through the side window and felt her stomach drop. It was Mark. He stood with his hands tucked into his coat pockets, trying to look casual, like a long-lost friend instead of the man who had abandoned her and Lucas a decade ago. She opened the door just enough to speak through the crack. "What do you want?" His eyes softened in practiced remorse. "I just want to talk. I want to see my son." Emily didn't flinch. "You had 10 years to do that." "I made mistakes," he said quickly, his voice low. "I was scared, but I'm here now. I want to do the right thing." She narrowed her eyes. "You don't even know what right means." He started to say something else, but Emily shut the door. The next day, she spotted Courtney lingering at the end of the block in her car, sunglasses on, pretending to scroll through her phone. Emily didn't react. She just held Lucas's hand tighter as they walked home from school. That evening, she noticed her back gate had been left ajar, and the basement light, which she never turned on, was glowing faintly beneath the floorboards. Someone had been inside. Emily locked every window and door, checked on Lucas, and reviewed her camera footage. The cameras had been a recent addition, something she'd installed after Margaret passed. Just in case, she found what she feared. Jason, in the early morning hours, sneaking around the back of the house, wearing gloves. That was enough. Emily didn't wait. She printed out the footage, the audio recording of Courtney, and the copy of the trust fund documents. Then she filed a full restraining order against all three, Mark, Jason, and Courtney. She gave the police everything, and she wasn't done yet. The next day, she met with her attorney and made a move she'd been considering for weeks. She updated her will, her financial power of attorney, and Lucas's guardianship plan. She included a clause that barred any biological relatives of Mark Carson from ever gaining custody of Lucas, no matter the circumstance. They weren't just trying to steal money. They were trying to get to Lucas, and that crossed a line she would never tolerate. Later that week, as dusk fell over the neighborhood, Emily and Lucas sat at a small restaurant, just the two of them. The food was warm, the conversation light, until Lucas suddenly paused mid-bite. "Mom, why do those people keep showing up?" Emily took a deep breath and reached across the table, covering his hand gently. "Because sometimes, when people are greedy, they'll do anything to get what they want, even hurt others." "Are we going to be okay?" he asked. "We already are," she said firmly. But even as she spoke the words, a flicker of unease lingered in her gut. When they left the restaurant, she stuck to the side streets. It was quieter. Lucas clutched her hand, and the alley they took led past a familiar old convenience store. But as they turned the corner, she saw Mark, standing there, fake tying his shoes. Her body froze. Then, from the other end of the alley, Courtney appeared, her tone mocking as she said, "Kinda late for a stroll, don't you think?" Emily placed herself between them and Lucas, voice calm but sharp. "If you take one more step, I'll have you charged with attempted kidnapping." Mark scoffed. "Kidnapping? Come on, Emily. You think I'm bluffing?" She raised her phone. "I already called the police the moment I saw you near the school last week. They're probably on their way now." For a second, Courtney hesitated. "She's lying," she hissed. "The cops don't come that fast." But just then, the bell above the convenience store door chimed, and Toby, the store owner, stepped outside. "You okay over there?" he called out, already pulling out his phone. That was enough. Courtney grabbed Mark's arm and hissed, "We need to go." He lingered for half a second too long, looking into Emily's eyes like he still thought he had a chance. But whatever flicker of confidence he had left burned out in that moment. He turned and disappeared into the dark with Courtney behind him. 5 minutes later, The flashing lights of a police cruiser painted the street red and blue. Emily gave a full report, handed over the audio, the video footage, and the statement from Toby. "They haven't hurt you or your son yet," one of the officers said gently, "but the intent is clear. We'll keep patrols in the area, and I suggest you consider moving, at least temporarily." Emily nodded, her arms wrapped protectively around Lucas. "I'm not running. This is our home, and I'm not letting anyone take that from us." As the officers drove away, Lucas looked up at her with tired eyes. "Mom, I'm not scared. I know you'll keep me safe." Emily kissed the top of his head and held him closer. Always. The next few weeks brought a shift, not just in Emily's life, but in the entire community. Word got around fast in small towns like Asheville. Stories had a way of traveling quicker than logic, and when people found out what Mark, Courtney, and Jason had tried to do, their reputations disintegrated almost overnight. At first, it came in whispers. "I heard Courtney tried to follow Emily through an alley. Can you believe that? Mark Carson? Wasn't he the one who disappeared for 10 years and came back after Margaret died? Jason's a joke. Spent all that time gambling and now wants to act like he deserves something?" Emily didn't need to say a word. The town spoke for her. Jason was the first to crack. His mounting gambling debts, once shielded by secrecy, became public after a local creditor took him to small claims court. No one would lend to him anymore. Even the poker rooms downtown, once happy to extend credit, banned him after rumors of unpaid tabs spread. Courtney fared worse. She'd been selling insurance part-time, building her clientele through charm and fast talk. But now, former clients were canceling left and right. Her name had become synonymous with manipulation. One woman even posted a screenshot of Courtney's tearful, self-pitying video online, where she claimed Emily had stolen what rightfully belonged to the Carsons. The comment section turned savage. "You didn't care for that woman. Emily did. Sit down. Being broke doesn't make you entitled to someone else's life. Try getting a job instead of stalking people." It wasn't long before Courtney's account was flagged and suspended. Whatever sympathy she had hoped to gain evaporated in public ridicule. And then came Mark. After the police officially denied his request to access the trust fund, and after the letter from Emily's attorney outlined the legal barrier he could never cross, he stopped pretending. The mask dropped. He stayed in town a few more days, floating between gas stations, convenience stores, and coffee shops, asking old acquaintances for help. No one offered it, not after what they'd heard. One morning, Emily spotted him sitting on a bench outside the library, staring blankly at the street. He looked smaller somehow, hollow, like a man who'd tried to steal from a fire and ended up burned. She walked past him without pause. No words, no acknowledgement. She owed him nothing. A few days later, a neighbor mentioned seeing Mark board a bus heading west. Just like that, he was gone again. No goodbye, no apology. Just silence. The way he'd always operated. Courtney and Jason vanished soon after. No dramatic scenes, no last confrontations, just quiet departures. And for the first time in years, the house on Maple Street finally felt still in a way that wasn't painful. It felt safe. Emily stood on the front porch one early morning, a cup of black tea warming her hands, the soft scent of spring jasmine in the air. Lucas was still asleep, the sun not yet peeking over the hills, and the town was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to exhale. In the days that followed, Emily slowly began reconnecting with the world she'd been cut off from. She volunteered at the local library, signed up to help organize the town's summer fair, and even visited Lucas's art class during Parent Week. "You're always so calm," one of the other moms said to her with a smile. "It's like you figured it all out." Emily just smiled softly. "I figured out what matters." She also started putting together a quiet project she'd dreamed about in the back of her mind for months, a home-based consultation service for women in caregiving roles. Whether they were looking after an aging parent, a special needs child, or just overwhelmed by life, Emily wanted to create a space where they could come for guidance, emotional support, or simply someone who would listen. She reached out to a former counselor friend who worked in family services and pitched the idea. "You really want to help people walk through the fire you came out of?" the woman asked. "I want to make sure they don't have to walk it alone," Emily replied. The first step was small, setting up a quiet room in her home as a meeting space, creating a modest website, printing flyers. But every piece of it felt meaningful, as if she was piecing together something more than a business. She was reclaiming her purpose. That Friday evening, Lucas came home waving a small certificate in the air. "Mom, I got Student of the Week," Emily laughed, pulling him into a hug. "You deserve it, sweetheart. I'm proud of you." They celebrated with ice cream and board games. Later that night, after he went to bed, Emily stood in the kitchen, pinning his certificate next to his drawing of the big tree. The fridge door had become a kind of altar, holding all the small triumphs of their new life, no longer built on sacrifice, no longer shaped by survival, but rooted in strength, in choice, in love. The last traces of winter had melted from the streets of Asheville. By early June, the air smelled of cut grass and honeysuckle, and the trees lining Maple Street had burst into full green bloom. Emily Carson stood barefoot in her kitchen, a soft morning light spilling through the window. Lucas was seated at the table, coloring a rocket ship and chatting excitedly about his upcoming science fair. His voice filled the house like music, steady, bright, alive. And for the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. This house, once filled with the sounds of Margaret's shallow breathing and the clatter of medical equipment, now echoed with laughter and crayons rolling off the table. It no longer carried the weight of sacrifice. It breathed with new beginnings. That morning, Emily brewed a cup of tea and stepped out onto the front porch. She had done this many times before, but today felt different. She wasn't watching for danger anymore. She wasn't waiting for someone to take something from her. She was simply being. She listened to the birds. She watched a child ride his bike past the gate. She closed her eyes and smiled. Later that afternoon, Emily and Lucas walked to the community garden a few blocks away. They had started going every weekend, planting basil, tomatoes, and a few stubborn bell peppers. Lucas loved checking on the progress, counting the leaves and naming the plants after comic book characters. "Mom," he asked as they watered the soil, "when I grow up, can I stay in this house with you?" Emily chuckled. "You might want your own place someday." "I don't think so," he said seriously. "This is the safest place in the world." Emily didn't answer right away. Her throat tightened a little. She knelt down and helped him dig a small hole for a new sprout. "You make it safe," he added. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away with a soft smile. "Then we're doing something right." That evening, they cooked dinner together, spaghetti with garlic bread. Lucas stirred the sauce while Emily chopped vegetables, his little hands covered in tomato splatter. When he wasn't looking, she pinned his science fair flyer to the fridge right beside his Student of the Week certificate. The refrigerator had become their personal gallery, a testament to growth, both his and hers. After dinner, Lucas curled up on the couch with a book, and Emily sat beside him, her laptop open. The consultation project was slowly growing. She'd started receiving emails from other women, mothers, caregivers, granddaughters, asking for advice, resources, or just a safe place to talk. One message read, "I saw what you posted about caring for someone who no longer remembers your name. That's me. I didn't think anyone else understood until I read your words." Emily stared at the screen for a long time before replying, her fingers moving with purpose. She wasn't just building a business. She was building community, connection, a safe space for women like her who had spent years unseen. That night, after Lucas had gone to bed, Emily stepped out onto the small balcony outside her bedroom. She sat in silence, the night breeze brushing gently against her skin. From this perch, she could see the neighborhood, still and glowing under soft amber streetlights. She thought about the woman she used to be, the young wife who moved into this house full of hope, only to be left behind, the invisible caregiver who cooked, cleaned, and stayed while everyone else left, the woman who cried alone in the dark, who second-guessed every step, who gave and gave until there was almost nothing left. That woman was gone now. In her place stood someone stronger, not hardened but wiser, not bitter but free. She no longer needed apologies from Jason or Courtney or Mark. Their opinions no longer held weight. Their absence was a blessing, not a wound. She had her son, she had her peace, and more than anything, she had herself. Emily whispered into the night, "I'm home." Not just in the house, but in her own life, her own body, her own heart. The wind stirred the trees, a dog barked a few houses down. The rest of the world moved quietly, like a page turning at the end of a chapter. And Emily Carson, woman, mother, survivor, rebuilder, sat in the stillness, ready to write the next one. In life, the people who sacrifice the most are often the ones most easily forgotten. Emily Carson's story is a powerful reminder that devotion and love are not always rewarded with gratitude, but that does not diminish their worth. For 10 years, Emily cared for her paralyzed mother-in-law while others walked away, dismissing her as just the help. She was overlooked, disrespected, and excluded. But in the end, it wasn't the inheritance or public recognition that defined her. It was a quiet letter of thanks and a hidden gift that acknowledged her heart when no one else had. One of the most profound lessons from Emily's journey is this: your value doesn't come from how others see you, it comes from how you choose to live each day. Emily didn't raise her voice or demand credit. She made her stand through quiet dignity, clear boundaries, and the fierce instinct to protect her child and her peace. When greed and manipulation circled her life, she met it not with chaos, but with strategy and self-respect. Most importantly, Emily teaches us that life doesn't begin when others finally recognize your worth. It begins the moment you choose to reclaim it for yourself. She stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. She stopped needing permission to move forward. And in doing so, she didn't just rebuild her home, she rebuilt her identity, her purpose, and her joy. This story reminds us that we can't always control how others treat us, but we can control how we respond, how we rise, and how we choose to love. Even in the silence, even in the struggle, even when no one says, "Thank you," there is strength in staying true to yourself. And sometimes, that quiet strength, it's enough to change everything.